The fire roared like a beast, swallowing the old barn in seconds, its flames clawing at the Oregon sky. Eli Carter, 28, stood frozen, his heart pounding louder than the sirens wailing in the distance. This was his moment, his chance to prove he belonged, despite the whispers and glares from his firefighting crew. Eli had always known he was different. Growing up in the small town of Willow Creek, Oregon, he'd hidden his truth behind a mask of bravado, excelling in sports and volunteering at the local fire station to fit in. But last month, when he'd finally come out as gay to his team at Station 19, the camaraderie he'd fought for crumbled overnight. His captain, a grizzled man named Hank Torres, had looked at him like he'd betrayed the brotherhood. "We don't need distractions," Hank had said, his voice cold as steel. The others followed suit, some with silence, others with cruel jabs. Eli's locker was defaced with slurs, his gear tampered with. He was no longer one of them. Now, as the barn fire raged, Eli gripped his helmet, his jaw tight. He wasn't supposed to be here. After weeks of being sidelined, assigned desk duties, or forgotten during calls, Captain Torres had made it clear he wasn't wanted on active duty. But Eli had heard the call on the scanner, a desperate plea for backup. A family was trapped inside, and Station 19 was shorthanded. He'd raced to the scene, driven by something deeper than protocol. A need to prove his worth, not just to them, but to himself. The crew was already there, hoses blasting water into the inferno. Smoke billowed, thick and black, obscuring the stars. Eli spotted Torres barking orders, his face etched with stress. The other firefighters, Jake, Maria, and Liam, moved with practiced precision, but their eyes flicked toward Eli with suspicion as he approached. "What the hell are you doing here, Carter?" Jake sneered, his voice barely audible over the crackle of flames. "Go back to your desk." Eli ignored him, pulling on his gear. "There's a family in there," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "I'm going in." Torres spun around, his eyes narrowing. "You're not cleared for this. Stand down." But Eli's gaze locked on the barn, where faint screams echoed through the roar of the fire. A mother and 2 kids, the dispatcher had said. Every second mattered. He took a step forward, defiance burning hotter than the flames. "I'm not asking permission." Before Torres could stop him, Eli sprinted toward the barn, the heat hitting him like a wall. His training kicked in: stay low, check for structural weaknesses, listen for signs of life. The smoke stung his eyes, but he pushed through, his heart racing with a mix of fear and purpose. He wasn't just fighting the fire. He was fighting for his place in a world that had rejected him. Inside, the barn was a maze of collapsing beams and blistering heat. Eli's flashlight cut through the haze, landing on a woman huddled in a corner, clutching 2 small children. "I've got you," he shouted, his voice muffled by his mask. The mother's eyes were wide with terror, but she nodded, trusting him. Eli scooped up the younger child, a girl no older than 5, and guided the mother and her son toward the exit. A beam crashed behind them, sending sparks flying. Time was running out. Outside, the crew watched in stunned silence as Eli emerged, the family in tow. The mother sobbed, clutching her children, while paramedics rushed to their side. Eli's chest heaved, his face streaked with soot, but he felt alive. More alive than he had in weeks. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of respect in Torres' eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "You disobeyed a direct order," Torres snapped, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're done, Carter. Turn in your badge." Eli's heart sank, but he stood tall. "I saved them," he said quietly, his voice trembling with conviction. "That's what we do, isn't it?" Torres said nothing, turning away as the crew dispersed. Jake muttered something under his breath, but Maria, the only one who'd ever shown Eli kindness, gave him a small, sad nod. Eli walked back to his truck, the weight of rejection heavy on his shoulders. But as he drove away, the image of that family, safe because of him, burned brighter than the fire he'd just faced. That night, Eli sat alone in his small apartment in downtown Willow Creek, staring at the photo of him and his partner, Marcus, on the fridge. Marcus, 32, was a carpenter with a warm smile and hands that could build anything from a bookshelf to a home. They'd met 2 years ago at a local art fair, where Marcus had been selling hand-carved wooden sculptures. Eli had been drawn to his quiet confidence, the way he spoke about his craft with passion. Their first date had been a hike through the Cascades, where Marcus had kissed him under a canopy of stars, promising they'd face the world together. But now, with his firefighting career in tatters, Eli wondered if he could keep that promise. Marcus deserved better than a man who was falling apart. Eli's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Heard what you did today. I'm proud of you. Come to the workshop?" Eli's chest tightened. He didn't deserve Marcus' faith, not when he felt so broken. But he grabbed his jacket and headed out, needing the one person who saw him for who he was. The workshop, a cozy space filled with the scent of sawdust and varnish, was Marcus' sanctuary. When Eli arrived, Marcus was sanding a cedar table, his dark curls falling into his eyes. He looked up, his smile soft but piercing. "You're a hero, you know that?" he said, setting down his tools. Eli shook his head, his throat tight. "They don't want me, Marcus. I risked everything, and it wasn't enough." Marcus stepped closer, his hand resting on Eli's cheek. "It was enough for that family, and it's enough for me." Their lips met, a quiet anchor in the storm of Eli's life. For the first time that day, he felt like he could breathe. But as they stood there, wrapped in each other's warmth, a distant siren wailed, pulling Eli back to reality. The fight wasn't over, not for his place in the world, and not for the love he was determined to protect. The next morning, Willow Creek buzzed with news of the barn fire. The local paper ran a front-page story. Local firefighter saves family in daring rescue. Eli's name was mentioned, but so was his suspension. The article quoted Captain Torres, who called Eli's actions reckless but effective. The word stung, but Eli couldn't shake the pride he felt reading about the family's gratitude. The mother, Sarah Gwynn, had told reporters, "He was our guardian angel." Eli sat at a corner table in the town's only diner, sipping coffee and avoiding the curious glances of other patrons. Marcus slid into the booth across from him, his eyes bright with determination. "You're trending on X," he said, holding up his phone. Eli groaned, but Marcus pushed the device toward him. Posts from locals praised his bravery, while others, anonymous, of course, spewed venom, calling him a disgrace to the fire station. The divide was stark, and it mirrored the fracture in Eli's heart. "We need to fight this," Marcus said, his voice firm. "You can't let them push you out." Eli stared into his coffee, the steam curling like the smoke from the barn. "What's the point? They've made up their minds. Torres won't budge." Marcus leaned forward, his hand covering Eli's. "Then make them see you, not just as a firefighter, but as a man who risks everything for what's right." Eli wanted to believe him, but the weight of rejection was crushing. He joined Station 19 to save lives, to be part of something bigger. Now he was an outcast in the only place he'd ever called home. Still, Marcus' words lit a spark. Maybe he wasn't done fighting, not yet. That afternoon, Eli drove to the station, his heart pounding as he walked through the familiar red doors. The crew was cleaning equipment, their laughter dying as they noticed him. Torres was in his office, a small room cluttered with maps and old coffee mugs. Eli knocked, his resolve wavering but holding. "I want back in," Eli said, standing tall despite the tremor in his voice. "I proved I can do the job. You can't ignore that." Torres leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You disobeyed orders, Carter. That's not how this works. Trust is everything in this job, and you broke it." "Trust?" Eli's voice rose, sharp with anger. "You stopped trusting me the second I told you who I am. I saved that family, and you're punishing me for it." Torres' jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Eli left the office, his hands shaking. As he passed the locker room, he overheard Jake and Liam talking. "He thinks he's a hero now," Jake said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Let him play martyr somewhere else." Maria, polishing her helmet nearby, caught Eli's eye. "They're wrong about you," she whispered. "Keep fighting." Her words stayed with Eli as he drove to the community center, where Marcus was leading a woodworking class for teens. The sight of Marcus guiding a shy girl through carving a birdhouse eased the ache in Eli's chest. Marcus had a way of making everyone feel seen, and Eli envied that gift. When the class ended, Marcus pulled him aside, his eyes searching. "What happened at the station?" Eli recounted the conversation, his frustration spilling over. "It's like I'm invisible to them. I don't know how to change that." Marcus thought for a moment, then grabbed a notebook. "Then we make them see you. Start a campaign online, in town, wherever. Show them who you are, Eli. Not just a firefighter, but a man with a story." The idea felt daunting, but Marcus' belief in him was a lifeline. That night, they sat at Marcus' kitchen table, drafting a post for X. Eli wrote about his love for firefighting, the pain of rejection, and his refusal to give up. Marcus suggested a hashtag, Fight for Eli. By morning, the post had hundreds of shares, with messages of support pouring in from strangers across Oregon. But there were also hateful comments, accusing Eli of seeking attention or worse. The backlash stung, but it fueled his resolve. Over the next week, Eli and Marcus organized a small rally at the town square. Locals showed up, some with signs reading "Heroes don't discriminate," others with glares and whispered slurs. Sarah Nguyen, the mother Eli had saved, spoke at the rally, her voice breaking as she thanked him. "He didn't care what anyone thought," she said. "He just saved us." The rally caught the attention of a Portland news station, which ran a segment on Eli's story. Suddenly, Station 19 was under scrutiny. Torres called Eli into his office the next day, his face grim. "You're making a spectacle of this," he said. "You think this helps your case?" "I think it helps the truth," Eli shot back. "I'm not the one who made this about who I am." Torres sighed, rubbing his temples. "There's a big fire coming, wildfire season's early this year. We're stretched thin. If you want in, you follow orders. No stunts." Eli's heart leapt, but he kept his face neutral. "I'm ready." As he left the station, Marcus was waiting outside, leaning against his truck. "You did it," he said, pulling Eli into a hug. "You're back in." "Not yet," Eli said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm closer." That night, as they lay in bed, Marcus traced circles on Eli's back. "You're stronger than you know," he whispered. Eli didn't reply, but he held Marcus tighter, grateful for the man who saw him when no one else did. Wildfire season hit Willow Creek like a freight train. The forests surrounding the town, usually lush and green, turned brittle under a relentless summer sun. By mid-July, a spark from a lightning strike ignited the Cascades, and the blaze spread faster than anyone had predicted. Station 19 was on high alert, and Eli, reinstated on a probationary basis, was thrust into the chaos. The crew gathered at dawn, their faces grim as Torres outlined the plan. The fire was moving toward a residential area on the town's outskirts, where dozens of families were at risk. Eli's stomach churned as he suited up, the weight of his gear grounding him. This was his chance, not just to fight the fire, but to reclaim his place among his team. Jake and Liam avoided his gaze, but Maria gave him a quick nod, her quiet support a lifeline. The fire line was a wall of heat and smoke, the air thick with ash. Eli worked alongside the crew, digging trenches and clearing brush to slow the fire's advance. Sweat soaked his uniform, but he pushed through, his focus razor-sharp. For hours they battled the blaze, the roar of flames drowning out everything else. Eli's mind was clear, his body moving on instinct. This was what he was born to do. But the fire was relentless, jumping containment lines and threatening a nearby evacuation center. Torres radioed for volunteers to reinforce the center's perimeter, where panicked residents were still loading buses. Eli stepped forward without hesitation. "I'm in." Torres hesitated, then nodded. "Go with Maria. Don't screw this up." Eli and Maria raced to the evacuation center, a community hall packed with frightened families. The fire was closing in, embers raining down like hellish snowflakes. Eli's heart pounded as he helped direct people to safety, his voice calm despite the chaos. Maria worked beside him, her efficiency a quiet reassurance. For the first time, Eli felt like part of the team again. But then the wind shifted, and the fire surged toward the hall. A group of stragglers, elderly residents and a few kids, were still inside, unaware of the danger. Eli didn't think twice. He grabbed a mask and ran into the building, Maria shouting after him. The smoke was thick, the heat unbearable, but Eli pushed through, finding the group huddled in a back room. "We're getting out now," he yelled, guiding them toward the exit. Outside, the crew had formed a line, battling the encroaching flames. Eli emerged with the group, coughing but steady, as paramedics took over. Maria grabbed his arm, her eyes wide. "You're insane, Carter. But you did good." The moment was fleeting. As the crew regrouped, Jake muttered, "Show off," loud enough for Eli to hear. The words cut, but Eli brushed them off. He wasn't here for Jake's approval. He was here for the people who needed him. That night, the fire was contained, but the town was shaken. Eli sat on the tailgate of Marcus' truck, watching the stars emerge through the haze. Marcus joined him, handing him a bottle of water. "You scared the hell out of me today," he said, his voice soft but edged with worry. Eli managed a tired smile. "I had to do it. For them. For me." Marcus leaned against him, their shoulders touching. "You're changing things, Eli. Not just for you, but for everyone who comes after." The words hit Eli hard. He'd been so focused on his own fight that he hadn't considered the bigger picture. Maybe his struggle wasn't just about proving himself. It was about paving the way for others. The thought gave him a new kind of strength, one that burned deeper than any fire. The next day, Eli woke to a flood of notifications. The Portland news station had aired footage of the wildfire response, highlighting Eli's role in the evacuation. The hashtag Fight for Eli was trending again, with messages from across the country. A queer advocacy group in Seattle reached out, offering to fund a legal challenge against Station 19's discriminatory practices. Eli hesitated, unsure if he was ready to escalate the fight. But Marcus, ever his anchor, urged him to consider it. "You're not alone in this," he said. "Let them help." Eli met with the group's lawyer, a sharp woman named Priya Patel, who laid out a plan to file a formal complaint with the state labor board. "Your captain's actions violate anti-discrimination laws," she said. "We can push for reinstatement and policy changes." Eli agreed, his heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. As the legal process began, Eli returned to the station, where tensions were higher than ever. Torres pulled him aside, his tone gruff but less hostile. "You're making waves, Carter. I don't like it, but I can't deny you're good at this job. Prove you can follow orders and we'll talk." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. Eli nodded, determined to show he could be both a firefighter and a fighter for change. That night, as he and Marcus cooked dinner in their tiny apartment, Eli felt a flicker of optimism. The road ahead was long, but with Marcus by his side and a growing community behind him, he was ready to face it. The legal battle gained traction faster than Eli expected. Priya Patel's team filed the complaint, and the story spread like wildfire across national news outlets. Station 19 was under a microscope, and Willow Creek became a battleground for debates about equality and duty. Eli felt the weight of every headline, every post on X, every whispered conversation in the diner. He was no longer just a firefighter, he was a symbol, and that scared him as much as it inspired him. At the station, the crew's resentment simmered. Jake and Liam kept their distance, but their glares spoke volumes. Maria, however, became an unexpected ally, quietly defending Eli when the others turned cold. One afternoon, as they cleaned the fire truck, she confided in him. "My brother's gay," she said, her voice low. "He never had the guts to come out at his job. You're doing this for him, too." Her words hit Eli like a punch. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Maria's brother, for every queer kid in Willow Creek who felt they had to hide. The realization gave him purpose, but it also made the stakes feel impossibly high. The state labor board scheduled a hearing, and Eli spent weeks preparing with Priya. Marcus was his rock, helping him rehearse his testimony and keeping him grounded when the pressure felt overwhelming. One night, as they sat on their balcony overlooking the town, Marcus took Eli's hand. "You're doing something big," he said. "Bigger than you know." Eli squeezed his hand, his heart full. "I couldn't do it without you." The hearing was held in a sterile conference room in Portland, packed with reporters, advocates, and a few curious locals. When it was Eli's turn to speak, he stood, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "I've wanted to be a firefighter since I was a kid," he began. "Not to prove anything, but to save lives. When I came out, I didn't change who I am or how I do my job. But my team decided I wasn't one of them anymore. I saved a family from a fire, and I'd do it again, no matter what they think of me." The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Priya followed with a powerful closing, citing legal precedents and calling for Eli's reinstatement and mandatory diversity training for the station. As the hearing ended, Marcus pulled Eli into a hug, whispering, "You were incredible." The board promised a ruling within weeks, but the wait was agonizing. Eli threw himself into his probationary duties, determined to prove his worth. The wildfires had left the town on edge, and Station 19 was called to a series of smaller blazes. Eli worked tirelessly, earning grudging respect from some of the crew. Even Jake, the loudest of his critics, stopped with the snide remarks, though he never apologized. One evening, as Eli and Marcus walked through downtown Willow Creek, they passed a mural painted on the side of the community center. It depicted a firefighter in silhouette, surrounded by flames, with the words "Courage in all forms" written below. A local artist had painted it in Eli's honor, and the sight brought tears to his eyes. Marcus squeezed his shoulder. "This is your legacy." But the fight wasn't over. The labor board's ruling came down in Eli's favor, ordering his full reinstatement and mandating anti-discrimination training for Station 19. The news was a victory, but it came with a catch. Torres announced his retirement, citing personal reasons. The crew was shaken, and some blamed Eli for the upheaval. Liam cornered him in the locker room, his face red with anger. "You happy now? You tore this place apart." Eli stood his ground. "I didn't tear anything apart. I just wanted to do my job." Liam stormed off, but Maria overheard and gave Eli a small smile. "He'll come around," she said. "Give it time." That night, Eli and Marcus celebrated quietly at home, cooking a meal together and toasting to the future. But as they clinked glasses, a call came over Eli's radio. Another fire, this time in a warehouse on the edge of town. It was all hands on deck, and Eli knew this was his chance to show the crew he was one of them, not as a symbol but as a firefighter. The warehouse fire was unlike anything Eli had faced. The building, an old storage facility filled with chemicals, burned with a ferocity that shook the ground. Station 19 arrived to find the structure engulfed, flames licking the night sky. Eli's heart raced as he suited up, the crew's eyes on him. This was his moment to prove he belonged not just to them but to himself. Torres was gone, replaced temporarily by a captain from a neighboring station, a no-nonsense woman named Carla Ruiz. She gave orders with calm precision, and Eli respected her immediately. "Carter, you're with Maria on the east side," she said. "We need to contain this before it spreads to the nearby homes." Eli nodded, adrenaline surging. He and Maria moved in sync, dragging hoses and battling the blaze. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking, but Eli's focus was unshakable. He caught Jake watching him, his expression unreadable. For once, there were no taunts, just the shared urgency of the moment. Then came the call that changed everything. A worker was trapped inside, missed during the initial evacuation. Ruiz hesitated, the risk too high with the building's stability compromised. But Eli's instincts kicked in. "I'm going in," he said, his voice firm. Maria grabbed his arm. "Eli, it's too dangerous." "I've got this," he said, meeting her eyes. She nodded, trusting him. Eli plunged into the warehouse, the heat searing his skin through his gear. He navigated the collapsing structure, his flashlight cutting through the smoke. The worker, a young man named Diego, was pinned under a fallen beam, his face pale with fear. "Hang on," Eli shouted, using a crowbar to lift the beam just enough for Diego to crawl free. Together, they stumbled toward the exit, the building groaning around them. Outside, the crew cheered as Eli emerged, Diego leaning on him. Paramedics rushed forward, and Maria threw her arms around Eli, her relief palpable. Even Jake clapped him on the shoulder, a silent acknowledgement that spoke louder than words. Ruiz approached, her eyes steady. "Good work, Carter. You're one of us." The words hit Eli like a wave. He'd fought for this moment, through rejection, hate, and doubt, and he'd won. As the crew packed up, Eli looked out at the smoldering warehouse, the stars above finally visible through the clearing smoke. He felt whole, like he'd finally found his place. Back at home, Marcus was waiting, his face lighting up when he saw Eli. "You're okay?" he breathed, pulling him into a tight embrace. Eli buried his face in Marcus' shoulder, the weight of the night melting away. "I did it," Eli whispered. "They see me now." Marcus kissed him, soft and steady. "They always should have." The next day, the crew gathered at the station for a debrief. Ruiz announced that Eli's reinstatement was permanent, and the anti-discrimination training would begin next week. To Eli's surprise, Jake stood up. "I was wrong about you," he said, his voice gruff. "You're a damn good firefighter." It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. Willow Creek began to change, too. The mural on the community center became a local landmark, and Eli was invited to speak at schools and events, sharing his story of resilience. He and Marcus worked together to start a support group for queer first responders, a safe space for others to be themselves. The group grew, drawing members from across Oregon, and Eli felt a pride he'd never known. One evening, as the sun set over the Cascades, Eli and Marcus hiked to their favorite spot, a clearing with a view of the town below. Eli took Marcus' hand, his heart full. "I used to think I had to choose," he said, "between who I am and what I do. You showed me I could have both. Marcus smiled, his eyes warm. You showed yourself, Eli. I just got to watch. They stood there, silhouetted against the sunset, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that had tried to break them. Eli knew the fight wasn't over. Prejudice didn't vanish overnight, but he also knew he was strong enough to face it. With Marcus by his side, and a community slowly learning to see him, Eli Carter had become more than a firefighter. He was a beacon, a reminder that courage, in all its forms, could change the world.